Welcome to the source. The source. Source. Hey, get the source.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Long time no see. We just did the MLB show like 2 hours ago because we got off to a late start. I know Toast's first 5 under hit, but I think his Reds bet lost. So it looks like he's sitting at about 1-1 so far. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, we're going to start with the NFL game. Obviously, that's on tonight. And then we're going to do 5 college football games in a row. First up, we're going to do the game that is tonight. And then we got 4 more lined up. And we got Ben Rasa waiting in the background to come on and talk about some college football too. So let's start with the NFL game. As I'm sure you guys already know what I'm on. I don't love it, but I feel Dolphins would be the side for me. Very strange because you go on some of those apps and look, I've been very vocal about how I think that the money in the bet percentage, just you got to take that data with a grain of salt. But some of them are showing like the public's all over Buffalo. Meanwhile, everyone I talk to is on the Dolphins. So it feels the other way based on just my interactions with people and what I've seen. But personally, I don't really care. Josh Allen, I know that he has owned the Dolphins, but if you limit the sample size to just the last 3 years, he's played much better against them in Buffalo. On the road to Miami, his numbers don't look that great. Miami, as we know, 2 years straight has played much better defense at home. Also, I really like how the Dolphins defense looked with Anthony Weaver last week. They started off looking shaky, but I really like how they made some halftime adjustments. They shut the Jags down in the second half. I think they had like 105 yards of total offense in the second half completely, and that's with a new defensive coordinator. So it's definitely a good sign to see a new DC make halftime adjustments that were successful and that essentially won Miami the game, because I think we could all agree they wouldn't have won if the defense kept giving up points. So I really like what I saw there. We didn't see it last week because they played Arizona, but I am concerned with the Joe Brady Bills offense. I've said that a few times. Everyone like, oh, they started running the ball, and now the Bills and James Cook, they're just unstoppable rushing attack. I mean, the efficiency numbers don't say that. Maybe the consensus feels that way because they ran all over the Cowboys in the game of the week that everyone was watching. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, the rushing efficiency numbers just aren't really there in this Joe Brady era of Bills football. They averaged just 3.9 yards per carry last week against the Cardinals. Even after Joe Brady took over, yeah, James Cook's numbers got better in terms of fantasy football. They averaged like 4.05 yards per carry. It wasn't the most efficient rushing attack. Miami, although some of these numbers may be inflated, in terms of yards per carry, was the second best run defense in the NFL last year. Now, those are a little bit inflated. They're not that good. And they also lost their D tackle from last year. So I'm sure they take a step backwards. But this is... You compare the Dolphins' run defense in Miami to the Cardinals, and it's not even a discussion. We're talking about a night and day difference. So I don't think Joe Brady's going to be able to come out and establish the run in this one, which means Josh Allen is going to be forced to make throws on the road under pressure. And you know what happens when we see that? INT. I'm seeing a Josh Allen pick tonight, maybe 2. So, yeah, I'm on the Dolphins. I also think the Dolphins' defense scores at plus 650. But We'll do the touchdown scorers after. Either you gentlemen would like to speak?
Brad is the guest. He may go first.
Yeah, I'll listen. This is a game that I don't want to really be on the side unless you're taking the Bills up in a teaser there. I do think that getting 8 points here with how well Josh Allen's played against the Dolphins is really nice. Dolphins defense is kind of funny because we were questioning like how strong it would be last week. And in the beginning of the game, it wasn't great, right? The Jags were pretty much able to run all over them. There were some busted coverages in the secondary. And like you said, the Dolphins defense made some major adjustments at halftime. For anybody who got the -3 for the Dolphins, we're really, really excited. But anybody who did not got the 3.5, we're not excited, but they still won the game. And ultimately, that's all the coach cares about. I didn't like what I saw out of the Bills last week. I think a lot of the excitement about the Bills is going to come because of the fact they won the game. But there were times they were sloppy. They weren't great in defense. Their defensive line didn't get the push they want. You know, Milano's out. That hurts. He's a great tackler. We knew that would happen. But one thing is constant is Josh Allen is a gamer, right? He's going to do his absolute best to try to keep his team in the game. And for me, if you want to find a teaser leg in this, like another part, I end up teasing them up to 8.5, and I tease them with the Browns, getting them to 10.5 in that number. I just feel like this is just one of those games where the Bills are live to win, but I just feel like if Miami can replicate that success that they had in the second half against the Jags, I don't want to be on Bills +2. There's no value in being on the +2 number there. Maybe it was +3.5. It'd be more exciting, which is why I teased it up.
Yeah, I remember did some math last year on that. Like, when is it when is it fiscally responsible to take the number instead of the points? And the +2.5 was completely just take the money line. I remember I did that at the beginning of last season. So you are spot on with that. Prop Beaver, I know me and Prop Beaver talked about this game for like 3 hours last night. That video that you guys watched, we struggled with that. We were really struggling to find some angles with this game. I feel like it's very coin flippy. We did decide at the end that I think the Dolphins are the play. So I know that he is in the same boat as me. It's tough to find angles, but I actually didn't even know you had this prop. So I didn't even know you had a prop for this game.
Ultimately, I found a tweet from fancypointsdata.com that actually got me onto this play. So thank you to those guys. I'll just share what I found from them. They said that the Bills were again top 5 in too high usage in week 1 after ranking top 3 last season. And also what they said in the tweet was that over the past 2 seasons, Jalen Waddle's averaging 3.14 yards per route run against too high coverages. That is 3rd best in the NFL. So I was looking for something in this game, and I think that he might be the key to unlocking this Miami Dolphins offense here. Bills defense, going back to last year, leans a bit more zone heavy, and that's nice for us because Waddle's yards per route run rise from 2.13 against man to 2.94 against zone, going back to last season. If you look at last week against this Jags defense that surprisingly went from a very zone heavy look last season to a very man heavy look last week, the single look that he got against zone, the single catch that he got against zone, the man took for 63 yards. He is a zone killer. And what I also like about this matchup is that the Bills, while they overcompensated against wide receiver 1s last season, I think that they're going to do the same against Tyreek Hill in this one. They really struggled against wide receiver 2s. Last year, this defense was 28th in DVOA against wide receiver 2s compared to 9th against wide receiver 1s. In 3 regular season games against the Bills with Tyreek Hill, Waddle has managed 102, 114, and 46 yards on a hyper-efficient 23.8 yards per reception. So if you want to bet his longest receptions over, I have no objections there either. On top of that, what I like is that Tua in Miami, the guy tends to ball out. So guess what? So do his receivers. Waddle's over his last 15 of 22 home games. I think the icing on the cake for me here is the fact that Devon Achane's a little banged up in this one. They're pretty limited in terms of receiving options. So if he doesn't go, or even if he's limited in terms of what he can do out of the slot, then they really need Waddle to produce in this one. You mentioned that Milano's out. The middle of the field is very vulnerable. I think Waddle's going to do damages on the screens and on the crossers and those drag routes. So yeah, give me a Waddle over 64.5 receiving yards here. I know it moved up from 62.5 this morning. Don't care. Would play this up to 66.5.
Yeah, and I think it definitely needs to be mentioned. This Bills team, as far as passing game versus passing game, the Bills team took some heavy losses. Obviously, you guys already know what they are, but Gabe Davis and Diggs on the offensive side. And we haven't seen it yet, but if Joe Brady wants to run the ball, defenses, when they don't have to worry about those 2 receivers, are going to have a lot easier times game planning to stop said rushing attack. So I think defensive coordinators are in a little bit better position to put together a game plan for this Bills offense. That's number one without those 2 receivers. But on the other side, I feel like it might not be getting talked about enough. That entire Bills secondary that was elite for a couple of years there, there's no more Micah Hyde. There's no more Poyer. He's actually on the Dolphins, yep. Poyer. There's no more Tre'Davious White. Also, their nickel, that guy Teron Johnson is good, by the way.
He's a beast.
Yeah,
one of the best in football.
This game.
One of the best in football in terms of nickel corners.
If you look at the starting Bills secondary for this game, it's not to go on the road in Miami. It should scare you a bit. I'm a little concerned that the Dolphins weren't able to run the ball at all last week, but honestly, Jacksonville had a solid run defense last year, and they brought in Nielsen to be the defensive coordinator, who had a great run defense in Atlanta. I expect the Jags to have a top 10, maybe even a top 5 run defense this year. So I'm not like, completely selling on the Dolphins rushing attack because of one game. They did lose a couple offensive linemen, so maybe the Dolphins rushing attack takes a step backwards this year. But the Bills had a terrible run defense last year. So bounce back game across the board here for the Dolphins. And I know the Bills have owned them, but there hasn't been many times where the Dolphins were favored in that matchup at all, actually. I think the Bills have been favored in 10 of the last 11, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I'm on the fish, and I think the Dolphins score defensive touchdown here, plus 650 on FanDuel. How about that? All right. So we moving on to some college football? Or do we want, you know what? The touchdown scorer poll hit. So the community touchdown scorer is undefeated. Maybe we should give him another shot at that.
All right, so should we play the song and then do the poll? Okay.
Anytime, touching it down, scoring it, running around. It's the anytime, touchdown, scoring. Anytime you need touchdown. Yeah.
You know what I noticed? If you look closely, one of the walruses is giving the other walrus kind of a massage, a good petting. Yeah.
All right. So anytime touchdown score, it hit last time. So let's give him another shot here.
All right.
Now what we did in the Jets 49ers game was we excluded McCaffrey obviously didn't play. We excluded Breece Hall. So who were the heavy favorites to score a touchdown in this one? Achane?
Allen, Achane, Hill,
James Cook. James Cook. Let's put James Cook in there at plus 175.
Okay, so Cook plus one.
Waddle plus 180.
Okay.
Can't believe Matt Collins is plus 400 after scoring last week.
Did you see that video of Twitter of of Trump being like, he's a big man. He's a big man. Just,
no.
It was hilarious.
I didn't see that.
It was just a montage of Trump for 20 minutes talking about he's a big man. Just talking
Who was he
about,
talking? What was the meme talking about?
For some reason, there's
Matt Collins?
25 different seconds of Trump in different situations talking about a big man, and it was talking about me betting. I think it was Ian Hartitz saying me betting Matt Collins to score a touchdown tonight.
Put Josh Allen at minus 110. There's not really many options, so we got to use the favorites. And Tyreek Hill at minus 120. All right. Community touchdown scorer going for 2-0 here.
TD score. Okay. Let's see. And then I'll put on the screen for you, Kyle. I'll put your Miami thing just in case, you know?
Yeah, put it up there.
Yeah.
It's plus 650 on FanDuel. The Dolphins defense to score here, plus 650.
Now, does that include the special teams?
I think it depends on the sports book. To be honest, it's a market I have such a small interest in that I haven't even looked into whether or not it includes. I did hit one of these last year, and we all were pumped about it, and then I tried two more and missed on both.
Dude, I wish I did that against the Giants. I felt that in my stones. And my boy, too, AVG, brought it to the end zone. It felt like a smack in my face when he did that.
Prop Beaver, they were swayed by your Jalen Waddle analysis.
Okay, cool.
Jalen Waddle is the community touchdown scorer on the back of Prop Beaver's analysis.
Fantastic. So
it's all on you if this
gonna
loses.
Go. Yeah. All right.
All right, Jalen Waddle touchdown scorer plus Prop Beaver's putting on the screen and spelling community wrong.
I had a tough upbringing. 1 second. Community. I think that's right?
Plus 180. Come on now. There we go.
I'm nervous now.
There's the community touchdown score. Jalen Waddle plus 180. All right. Let's talk some college football. Talk to you later, Prop Beaver. Well, I mean, you'll still be sitting right here, but... All right, so we got Ben coming on. We got Andy coming on. We're going to start with tonight's game, Arizona State, Texas State. That one starts in about 3 hours, so that one's coming up.
Boy, all right. I don't know why that's bringing the text over, but I'll fix that. Let's get you guys on the screen.
Fun game.
Yeah, this is a
It's
cool
a fun game when you get college football on a Thursday or Friday, or Maction. I literally don't care who the teams are. It just makes it more fun having that standalone game that we can DJ on.
Well, you know what I think they should do? And so because Conference USA played a portion of their schedule on Tuesday and Wednesday nights last year, all of a sudden, I feel like I know Conference USA very well. And I feel like they should do it days of the week, like Tuesday night Conference USA, Wednesday night Sun Belt, Thursday night Maction. And you would have more well-rounded college football fans. I mean, it's not that I am not interested in Sun Belt football, but who's turning on the Sun Belt at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday? I mean, I have 6 TVs set up in front of me, and it wouldn't make the top 6. Like, it's just like, who's watching those games on Saturdays? But if you put them on Wednesday night, I'd watch every single one of them.
Every single one.
Yeah.
We'd be the biggest supporters of those conferences.
Exactly. And and I feel like Conference USA was the best thing they could have done, because Conference USA, if you rewind a year and a half ago, I knew shit about it. But now I feel like I'm a Conference USA expert, just because obviously when they have the standalone games, obviously I'm making videos on them because people are going to watch. Can't make a Conference USA video for a Saturday game. No one's going to watch it. So yeah, I feel like it's in the best interest. But anyway, let's talk about Arizona State, Texas State. And I uploaded a video on this one. Actually, so did Ben, because I watched it. And I think me and Ben are on the same side here. We're both on Texas State, right, Ben?
Yes, sir. Bobcats. They've been an awesome team. Obviously, they don't play, or even Arizona State teams of that type of caliber too often, but they're building something, and they do a lot of stupid stuff. They fumble all the time, but I honestly thought statement last week. UTSA is not a great team, but they slaughtered them. I watched that game from start to finish, and Texas State, McLeod, I trust them at quarterback. They're at home. I like this team. If they take care of the ball tonight, I really do think they're going to win.
Yeah, and my main reasoning is I don't want to say I'm calling bullshit, but I kind of am calling bullshit on the Arizona State defense. Football is a game of momentum and situations, right? In both games, Arizona State was, I don't want to say like lucky, because I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on Arizona State at all. Those were 2 great looking wins. But when you start off the game with a defensive touchdown and jump out to a 2-touchdown lead in 6 or 7 minutes, it puts you in an extremely advantageous position. And I'm not just talking about on the scoreboard. I'm talking about game planning, the plays. All of a sudden in that Wyoming game, you got a quarterback in Svoboda making his first start, and you're putting them in a situation where he's got to get down the field and score. He has to throw the ball on 3rd and 6. They can't play around. And that's like, you can't paint a more nightmare situation for Wyoming to be in than that. And then, look, last week, kind of the same thing. They had I think they had a fumble return late in the first quarter against Mississippi State. And then what happened? At halftime, it's 27-3 Arizona State. Mississippi State comes out of second half. It's like, you know what? Let's just load the box. Let's just make them throw the ball. I don't think this kid Levitt can throw it. Shit, it worked, because they almost came all the way back in that game. And I think I don't think Arizona State's I don't think Dillingham's comfortable letting Sam Levitt throw the ball yet. If you look at, and you talked about this in your video, Ben, about how he has no big time throws and no turnover worthy plays. And I repeated it and said the same thing in my video because it was a great point. They haven't asked him to do anything. They haven't asked him to do anything. And if I'm Texas State, I'm forcing Sam Levitt to beat me. Brad, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Levitt, actually, this Arizona State team, they're I think they're like 95th in rush rate over expected. They're running the ball because it's the best way to protect your quarterback, right? If you don't want to force the ball down the field. But I think in this game, they're going to have to, right? Like McLeod's Duke can ball, right? Texas State, that win over, was it UTSA? I believe it was UTSA who they played, was demonstrative, right? And you said the most funny thing ever is like, they have to take care of the ball. Jordan McLeod loves to throw interceptions, but he's also not afraid to make big throws. And I think that's what's going to kind of propel them in this game. I stayed away. I didn't have them separated by that much. But if they can get a little bit of push, and that's Texas State, a little bit of push with the ground game, I think it's going to be even better. Defensive success rate for Arizona State's not horrible on the ground. And then we look at EPA per rush gets a little bit better for them. But man, what are you going to do if you get in a shootout, right? Like if this becomes a back and forth game, you're not going to let Levitt go out there and just bomb away. But I do trust McLeod a ton. Yeah,
and if I honestly think if you put Arizona State in a situation where they need to play from behind and they need to throw Sam Levitt in some kind of 2-minute situation, that we'd have an entirely different opinion of this team. Personally, that's how I think of it. And also, it's a lot on the defensive side of the ball. we weren't really expecting Arizona State's defense to be great this year. They have looked good, but kind of the same idea. It's a lot easier to call a defensive game plan when you're up 17 points. The playbook is a lot more easy to manage. So it looks like we're all circling this. I actually got Texas State +1, but they're actually now laying 2.5. So we've seen some dramatic line movement here. It's clearly it would indicate that Sharp actually came in buying on the Texas State side. Are you with us, Andy?
Yeah, honestly, not much to add. The only thing for Arizona State is they kind of fell apart in that game against Mississippi State and kind of hurt their momentum coming into this. They still won the game, obviously, and even covered by half a point. But in the second half, Blake Shapen and Mississippi State, who are probably going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC this year, they really looked good and nearly came back. Yeah, he was doing a great job. And Shapen, now that he's healthy, maybe he'll have a good year. But I think McLeod's about at that level. So I think he'll be able to do a lot today in that. And then also Arizona State, they were able to run the ball like crazy on Mississippi State. I'm not gonna do my normal spiel about SEC defenses because it does not pertain to Mississippi State this year.
No,
that is not an SEC defense. That run defense is going to be bad this year, so I don't really look at that positively for Arizona State. So I don't think either of these teams have proven much because I watched Wyoming against Idaho. That wasn't an impressive win either. So these are two unproven teams, and I like the coaching advantage for Texas State. So yeah, I just think honestly not much to add. You guys nailed it all. I like Texas State here.
Wow, we swept the board. Texas State. We're a Bobcats program today.
Yeah, we are.
All right, let's move on to the next game. We got 4 more, and we got some good ones lined up for today. First one, Notre Dame, Purdue. And okay, so I recorded a video on this game this morning, and I have a bet. I haven't placed it yet. I'm trying to pick your guys' brains here. What do you guys think about hitting an under at 45.5? Anyone have any thoughts on that? I have my finger on the trigger here on an under at 45.5.
I don't hate it, right? Like Notre Dame's defense is still good, right? They didn't play amazing last game, but they were in kind of like a sticky situation, right? They went to College Station, won as underdogs, and now they go and play Northern Illinois. Like, I was a fool who fell into the trap. I took Northern Illinois team total under, but I stand by my statements of what I made before that game started. Notre Dame, good on the defensive line, elite secondary. If you look at, and this is why it's kind of funny, right? You look at stats and, the stats after 2 or 3 weeks are just going to be so skewed. Notre Dame, if you look at success rate, horrible defensive numbers, like 85th against the rush, and then 58th against the pass. But then if you look at EPA margin, they bump up to like in the 50s, which kind of just shows you that, like, yes, they had big explosive plays that kind of happened, but over time, the mean will level out. Over time, we'll see how good this team is going to be defensively, right? Bad spots, bad situation. And then do you what's funny about the offenses of these teams? Like, are you going to sit there and you're going to trust Hudson Card? Notre Dame kind of struggled on the defensive line and getting pressure. My original thought for this game when I was going to bet, I was ready to bet Hudson Card under 18.5 rushing yards. I thought Notre Dame would get some pressure last game, set up for this game, didn't get a sack last game. I think that's going to be an emphasis in practice all week, is getting to the quarterback, which helps your under. But then now you look at the other offense for Notre Dame, they're literally having their wide receivers come out in press conferences and interviews and say, somebody has to step up. That is never a good sign when you have an offense and your pass catchers are saying someone has to step up. Greathouse not making moves. Thomas not making moves. They even have Love out there catching passes because they don't know what to do. They don't have an identity. And a lot of that has to do with Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has not been driving the ball down the field. Riley Leonard has been banged up. And Riley Leonard, if he doesn't see that, if that first read's not there, he's going to try to take off. And that's just not conducive to scoring a lot of points. It's also not conducive to long-term success. So if you like the under, it makes total sense, right? Good defense, bad offenses. I didn't check the turnover margin. I could definitely do that, but I haven't seen this Notre Dame team make a lot of turnover-worthy plays. Like, I haven't seen them put themselves in positions to get short fields. The defense is just not breaking.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your Hudson Card point, I made this video, like I said earlier today, so I have these stats fresh in my head. I don't have the exact numbers fresh in my head, but what I did was I isolated Hudson Card's numbers of 4 specific games: Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, and Nebraska, which was the 4 toughest defenses he saw last year. His numbers in those games are like horrible. Where I'm not like a Hudson Card hater. I've actually seen him. I've seen him make some plays. I think Hudson Card's pretty good, but the 4 games where he saw elite defenses last year, he was really bad. And you could argue Notre Dame is every bit as good as Ohio State and Iowa's defense was last year. I mean, it's very good. So I as much as because what I said about Arizona State and Sam Leavitt, I feel like you can copy and paste some of that over here and say, Northern Illinois just showed us the playbook, man. Make Riley Leonard throw the football. They just gave it to us. That's how you beat the Irish. Make Riley Leonard throw the ball. It's set in stone. So I'm not trying to lay 10 on the road with Notre Dame. But if I don't expect Purdue to get the ball across the 50, then I can't be taking 10 points either. So that's how I arrived at the under. That was my thought process there. I actually think Andy is on Notre Dame here, though.
Oh, yeah. I think this is going to be ugly. Notre Dame not only getting punched in the mouth last week by Northern Illinois and losing, heartbreaking, tough spot. They should have been a shoe-in to go to the playoff this year, but they kind of ruined that. And now I do think going on the road to a Big Ten, I guess not Big Ten West, but Big Ten team is difficult, but they have to play better than they did. They did look like they looked good enough week 1 against A&M. That's a good defense. So, I don't think it's going to be Riley Leonard, but I think it's going to be the running backs, and I think the offense overall, I think they're just going to punch them in the mouth early. Purdue, like he said, they're not going to get anything done on offense. Hudson Card is awful. So I think that's going to be a bad spot there. I just think talent-wise, this is a mismatch. Spot-wise, it's a mismatch. I just think it's awful for Purdue. I think this is going to be ugly.
Ben, you heard a bunch of differing opinions there. You have anything here?
No, the only thing I'll add is I'm on protest for teams that have a bye in week 1. What is that? How is that? Played 1 game. That's just stupid. And it was an FCS team, so we don't know much about them, but I know enough just knowing Purdue football. I worry about them a little here. I do think that Notre Dame. They got caught. It happens. You come off an extremely emotional win. You're playing a MAC team that's better than you would think. There's no excuse. You should win that game in South Bend 100 out of 100. But still, I would expect them to respond. So I have no play on the game personally. I did entertain using, and I don't like to do this a lot, but using Notre Dame as some type of parlay piece. I would be stunned if they lost the game. I absolutely would. And it's not that bad. You roll them with another pretty good, you're getting to -110. So I think Notre Dame will look pretty good. But Purdue, we've literally not seen them against any competition whatsoever because them and Ball State didn't play in the opening week, which is even dumber. But only 1 game for the Boilermakers so far.
Now, if you guys watch, you guys know I'm not a trends guy. But this one is kind of interesting and it pertains to this game for those of you who do like trends. Teams that have lost the game outright as 28 or more point favorites are just 2-9 against the spread the following week since 2017. So that would point towards a Purdue cover. Again, I don't really place bets based on that, but I thought that one was interesting enough to share. That historically, if a team gets upset in a major way, they usually don't cover the spread the next week.
Wow.
All right, next game. What is next? Oh, love this bet. Got CLV here. I'm on the Gators, man. I think the Gators win outright. I'm holding Florida plus 4.5. You know what? This game just reminds me an awful lot of the Tennessee game last year, where I forget what game, who Florida had. You know what? I actually want to look it up. 2 seconds. 1 second. Because it reminds me so much of that game, and I remember it vividly. So hold on, Florida. Last year, Florida hosted Tennessee. And it was in week 3. It was even the same exact week. That's right. Okay. So Florida opened up their season with a devastating loss to Utah last year. Then they beat McNeese. And then they had week 3 Tennessee. And everyone was down on Florida. Everyone was down on Graham Mertz based on the opener. And I took Florida plus the points. They were even catching the same number. It was 4.5, 5 at home against Tennessee in week 3. And they won outright. And what did they do? Billy Napier came out with a game plan that was just so different than the rest of his season. He ran the football. He came out and ran the football on Tennessee. And it's so comparable because Tennessee's defense of that year is even comparable to Texas A&M's defense. It was powered by its pass rush. And look, if they're going to try to drop Graham, well, it's going to be DJ Lagway a lot of the game, by the way, if you don't know. So I believe they're doing a split quarterback where DJ Lagway is the freshman. He's the future of the Florida Gators. He's the highly touted prospect. He threw for like 1 billion touchdowns in the Samford game. So he's the guy. And I believe he's going to see most of the action moving forward. Graham Mertz looked terrible in the Miami game, or maybe they're going to split. But regardless, if they're going to try to drop back and just throw the ball on Texas A&M's defense with that pass rush, they're not going to have success. But Florida's always able to get the run game going at home. They did it in that Tennessee game. They ended up winning by 16. I expect them to run the ball on Texas A&M just like we saw Notre Dame do a couple weeks ago. Notre Dame averaged like 5.7 yards per carry on Texas A&M's defense. They got a strong edge rush, one of the best pass rushes in the country. Take that out of the game. Slam it between the tackles. Give it to Montrell Johnson. Maybe get Lagway using his legs a little bit. I like Florida to run the ball in this game. And look, Connor Wigman is just what he did in that opener. I'm not the type of person that like bashes players, but I was personally offended holding a Texas A&M ticket.
100 yards,
oh
13
my God.
points.
The stats don't even tell the story. If you were watching that game with the Texas A&M ticket, you were like, what? And so I went and looked, and I'm somebody that has spoken highly of Connor Wigman in the past. I mean, we've seen him go off in a couple of instances. He went off in the Ole Miss game last year or 2 years ago. They're all at home at Kyle Field. If you actually look at Connor Wigman's road performances, I mean, he's never shown us like a really good road game. In fact, that one game where he put up a bunch of numbers at Miami, yeah, he threw for like 330 yards or whatever it was. He dropped back to pass 50-something times. He dropped back to pass 1 billion times. So the yards look less impressive when you consider how many times he dropped back. And he threw 2 picks in that game and they lost. So he wasn't even nearly as good as his stat line indicates in Miami. He's never shown me he can go on the game and win. And by the way, Florida's run defense, I think, is going to be improved this year. They have a big defensive line. Like I think if Phil Steele said they had 4 guys, 320-plus pounds on the defensive line, and even though the Florida defense looked like shit in the Miami game, they really were getting carved up through the air from Cam Ward. They really getting eaten up on the run. So the only thing that was working about this Texas A&M offense in the Notre Dame game was the run. I don't expect that to be there. There's no way I'm taking Connor Wigman to cover a 4.5-point line. It's down to 3.5 now. I got it at 4.5 on the road through the air. Just won't happen. So I think Florida wins outright. I'm on the Gators.
I'm pretty impartial in this game, but I just want to touch on some things that you said that were pretty interesting. So I was looking at my numbers on the Gators in that game against the Hurricanes, and
Hurricanes.
In the front seven was pretty good, right? So I went and looked at havoc rate, and havoc rate is just one of those weird statistics where if you say a bunch of numbers, it sounds cool. So I didn't really care about that. I wanted to compare it to how they've been like over the last 7 years. It's only a 1-game sample size, but the front seven havoc rate was actually one of the best for a single game than they had as a season average in like the last 7 years, which is pretty impressive seeing how they played against Damian Martinez, who had 15 carries. And 15 carries didn't hit his 73.5 rushing yards, which is a big mark to say, especially when you're playing from behind there. Good on them. And I do think that's just going to give Wegman a little bit of trouble. Now, my issue is how does Florida handle the pressure of Texas A&M? When you look at Texas A&M from a statistical standpoint, defensively, that's where they're going to hang their hats, right? Their lack of quality offensive possessions bleeds into their defense, which means, more time on the field for their defense, worse field position for their defense. Their defense is actually made up for it. In that game when they played against Notre Dame, their EPA margin wasn't terrible, which basically is just like, if you get just a little bit of production from your offense, the game goes a different way. Defense held it down. But for me, it was like a total head scratcher. Don't know what Lagway's going to do against a good team, right? Like he played Samford last week. I do think it's funny that a lot of Gator fans were mad at me when I said the Gators will be lucky to win 4 games this season, right? They were mad, said we're going to win 7-8 games. it's okay. Take your lump this year, build this program up. You just need to get back to doing things well, running the ball effectively, getting pushed on both the offensive defensive lines. If you put up a good fight against the Texas A&M team, and I'm not talking about the score, but I'm talking about in the trenches, that's where it starts. That's how good teams start to get better. I mean, how bad teams start to get better is they win those individual battles in the trenches. And I haven't seen that from the Gators yet, so it couldn't get me to them, but I just didn't want to trust Wegman after 2 weeks ago where it was brutal.
Andy, are you with me on the Gators?
Yes. I think the Connor Weigman thing is obvious. I mean, the guy shrivels up when he sees a good team.
Is it Weigman? I was always saying Weigman, and somebody told me I was wrong.
Weigman, yeah. Well, I mean, doesn't matter. It's similar.
All right, go on.
So
listen, he plays football in the South. I'll tell you, 95% of the people who are going to say his name are going to say it incorrectly.
yeah,
Okay.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, every time he sees a good team, he shrivels up. You brought up the one good game he's had against Ole Miss. That was 2 years ago.
And that was at home.
Yeah, it was at home too. So like, I don't even look at that. He's faced nobody, and the only team he faced was Notre Dame and looked awful. So like, and I'll give Florida credit. They have a ton of talent on that team. They have a bad coach, but they have great amount of talent. So I think that'll take them in this one. Plus, Riley Leonard was able to run on Texas A&M in the first game of the season. Lagway brings that into the equation for Florida now. Now, he's not exactly like Cam Newton. He's not trying to run every single time. He's not, one of those complete dual threat guys. But when he needs to run and when it's useful, he can run. And he was running against Samford, and he ran even against Miami. He came into that game, and he was running in that one too.
The football gave him my over. He drove down the field, and he had a couple nice runs in there.
Yeah, so that's a challenge that Texas A&M has already proven. They can't defend. Riley Leonard ran all over him, so I think they haven't prepared for him, so I think that hurts. There's not a lot of film on Lagway, so he can come in and just be a complete mystery to the A&M defense. That helps. So yeah, I like Florida in this one. Plus, at home, the Swamp is not an easy place to go and win. I know Miami just killed them, but I think Miami could be competing for the national championship this year. So obviously, A&M is not that. So yeah, I like Florida here.
Ben?
I have to agree. Not as bullish as you guys, but there's no way I'm backing. I was on Texas A&M. I liked them a lot against Notre Dame, and I thought it was the game I wanted. And their quarterback's just not as good as I thought he was. Simple as that. So now hitting the road against Florida. Florida's biggest problem. They have two big problems. One, you guys said it. Not a big fan of their coach. Two, they play a schedule that's so comical that there's nothing you can really do. So those things are not really pertinent here. You're getting points at home in Gainesville. I think they'll be ready to go. I also think Miami, I'm a big Cam Ward guy. That's not as bad of a loss as you think. That line was wrong more than they got outplayed. They got outplayed by a better team.
Right. I agree there. All right, let's move on to the next game. And these next two, actually, I really want to hear these guys' opinion on the last one because I got nothing. I feel it's like a coin flip at 3. The last one's Indiana, UCLA. We're going to talk about Georgia, Kentucky next. Didn't spend a ton of time on this one. If I'm being honest, I'd love to take Kentucky, but coming off the huge upset, getting a huge number at home, maybe got caught in the look ahead. I don't know how you get caught in the look ahead in a big conference game, though. That doesn't even make sense. But Andy's a diehard Georgia fan, for those of you that don't know. So I'm sure he's laying the points here, and he's completely unbiased.
I'm not betting this game. I will say this about Georgia. They wake up when they need to. I don't necessarily think they need to this week. They are the proof that some teams just can do this. Some teams can wake up for games they have to. Some teams can't. I don't know what the reasoning is, but Kirby Smart has this team last year, perfect example. Kentucky came in ranked one of the top 20 teams in the country, came into Sanford Stadium, and they got decked. It was 51-17. It was over by halftime. This isn't one of those situations. Kentucky looked awful last week. Georgia doesn't have to wake up for this one because Brock Vandegrift looked terrible. Gavin Wimsatt came into the game. He looked even worse, which I didn't think that was possible. They had 44 yards passing last week. Do you think they're going to do better against Georgia? I doubt it.
Well, South Carolina's pass rush might be every bit as good as Georgia's. If not
yeah, 100%. South Carolina has one of the best pass rushers in the SEC. Georgia, obviously, Michael Williams might not even play in this game. He's Georgia's best pass rusher, so that hurts from that perspective. So, yeah, the reason I'm not laying it, because Georgia's probably 4 touchdowns better than this Kentucky team right now. The reason I'm laying it is I don't think Georgia needs to wake up for this game, and they've proven in years past that when they don't want to wake up, they could still sneak by. The Missouri game's a perfect example. Last year, they nearly, or 2 years ago, they nearly lost it.
I remember that game.
They just flipped the switch. So, like, they're that type of team. So they're not exactly what you would call a bet-on team. You don't want to bet them every week. Because they don't necessarily come to play every week. And this is a week I don't think they're going to.
So UK money line?
No, absolutely not.
Ben, Brad, either you guys have a look here.
I have 2 looks in this game.
Oh, okay.
Take it away.
Actually not going with Georgia on not laying the points early. I mean, in the game, I actually laying the points early. Taking Georgia first quarter spread -6.5. And Georgia first half spread -12.5. I like the 12.5 more than I like the 6.5. They're equal prices if you only wanted to pick one. Let's just talk about Kentucky and what we've seen out of Kentucky so far. Brock Vandagriff's not a good quarterback. Not a good quarterback at all. What's funny is I think that Kentucky takes a major step back this season because they lose Liam Cohen, right? Liam Cohen revolutionized this Kentucky offense. It was never a Kentucky team that had good offensive numbers. I mean, they made Will Levis into an NFL quarterback, an early draft NFL quarterback. And I think losing that first and foremost hurts. Then you have Brock Vandagriff, who's not a good quarterback. Then you're playing against a Georgia team who, for all accounts, talk about defensively, super stacked, right? Secondary is really legitimate, right? And you're not going to have Vandagriff throwing the ball a ton, 30 yards. I think his line set at around 130 for this game, and I think he probably goes under. You're going to try to run the ball down the teeth. Well, they're not getting a lot of push on their offensive line. Georgia's defensive line actually has looked better in 2 games. I'm really impressed. And then offensively for the Bulldogs, which makes me, instead of taking Kentucky team total points under, made me take the spreads, was just because their efficiency numbers over the past 2 years, or last year bleeding into this year, top 5 in like almost every efficiency category in terms of throwing the rock. A lot of that has to do with Carson Beck. Gets the ball out fast and accurate while still driving it down the field. Those are the things that worry me for Kentucky, right? If they start getting behind to this Georgia team. Another thing I want to add is Georgia gets the luxury of bringing ETN over. That just adds another wrinkle to this team, and I think it's just going to be a lot to handle for the Wildcats here. If anybody who wants to be devil's advocate, sure, they played tough games in Lexington, 16-6 the time before that 14-3, and then we start going more further down there. That's really before Kirby had his teeth into the recruiting, had this Georgia program really humming. I'm just really down on Kentucky, and I think it's going to be a very tough year for them. I did say this. I'll give the Florida fans credit. When I said Florida is going to struggle to win games, I thought Florida was going to win the game against Kentucky. I think they play them on homecoming, and I'm looking more excited about that bet. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be first quarter spread and first half spread for me.
I like Florida to come to win that game as well, because I like the revenge angle. Ray Davis ran all over the Gators. He ran for like 300 billion yards against Florida last year. I know that because I bet Florida, and I watched every one of those yards in pain. So, all right, you like Georgia early. Ben, anything in this one?
No, I mean, I'll just say this. I think there's a couple ways to play it. What Brad said makes a ton of sense. Jump on them early. Or I think you can, if you're willing to pass, if Georgia's sluggish, just hit them live, because they will wake up if they have to. They're a very gentle giant, honestly. Even when they play the FCS schools, it's always like, 45-3. It's never out of hand. They don't score. Ole Miss is beating Furman. It's like 80-0. Georgia doesn't do that. They just relax. They get everyone some reps. And even against teams like this, it's a 45-point total to give you an indication of what we could see. So if Georgia's playing with their food and messing around, hit them live. You'll shave a ton of points off that line. Or you could just jump on them early like Brad talked about. I think that makes a ton of sense.
If it's a 45-point total, that means the line we're looking at, what's Kentucky's team total going to be at here?
I think their team total is like
13, 12?
I think it's
Not
like
even.
10.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was 10, that would be like 34-10.
Well, hold on. All right, so hold on. Last week we saw Vandagriff look terrible, right?
Yeah, 10.5.
10.5. So last week we saw Vandagriff look terrible against the South Carolina pass rush. Andy just said Georgia's best pass rusher might not be in the game, which means they might go from seeing the number 1 pass rush in the country to maybe like a number 40, number 50 pass rush in the country. Tell me they don't score a late touchdown here and get over that number.
I told you I'm not betting this game. All I know is Kentucky in the last 8 years against Kirby Smart has averaged 10 points a game. So like that line is perfect.
I'm running it down.
This
I might
is a
take
team
Kentucky
that
team total over. I'm feeling
they don't compete usually in these games. But
all right, Kentucky.
Ben made a
writing it
good
down.
point.
Don't
Georgia
be surprised
doesn't.
if you see me post a Kentucky team total over. I'm feeling froggy here. All right, 10.5 at home. Fuck Georgia, man. All right, next up. All right, so this
6
game
at home last week.
when I tell you I have no idea, on one side, you know what it is? It's the nickname. Because I think before the nickname got in my head, I'd be UCLA plus the points here without hesitation. But 9-win Indiana has just stuck with me, and this team is like in my head. 9-win Indiana, man. I don't know. I have no idea, but I want to bet this game. I'm all ears. Ben, Brad, either of you guys want to take this one?
Man, I feel like I talked about this game on the NBC show and I got kind of made fun of here. And my only reasoning for being weary about this game and being weary of Indiana with Cignetti and everything is this cross country travel, right? We're going to start seeing a lot of this for these Big Ten teams, these cross country travel, and they're laying points. The lines come down a bit, right? Like people are starting to bet on UCLA, but you're really going to have to trust a really bad UCLA team. Ethan Garber's not a good quarterback. It was funny. I had asked one of my colleagues, why did they run the ball with Harden more? And he's like, you can't run the ball with someone more if you're not having any success. And I was like, that's the best answer you possibly could have given. So you're going to kind of need a miracle here. Defense will be okay. I think their defense will be fine. They lose Lynn, right? They lose Kelly. And it's basically a new UCLA team with no identity. So for me, it was a pass. I just did get afraid to lay points on a team making a cross-country road trip.
Yeah. Okay. So by no means am I going to push back about what you said about the UCLA offense. It could be disgusting. I get it. But are we all of a sudden just buying in on this new Indiana experiment because they scored a little bit on FIU? The cross-country travel, by the way, is something I didn't even consider. That's a great addition to what I had already been thinking. I was thinking, sweet, you guys scored a few touchdowns on FIU. Like, this is a different, like, okay, UCLA may not score. Why are we so blindly trusting the Indiana offense, the 9-win Indiana offense? Ben, do you have anything in this one?
I'm trusting the blind Indiana offense. I'm in. I think it's because I'm an Florida International, by the way. Central Michigan, what a joke that was. They never should have been underdog in that game. And then so the travel, I think, is a good point. I will say this, though. Indiana played on Friday, and they played Western Illinois, who's not a real team. They won by literally 70 points. I think that mitigates some of it. It's not a brutal game, and then you have to fly out west. They had that well in hand to me. I think Indiana's got something. This is also a short of if Hawaii's quarterback didn't get banged up and they weren't in a hurricane, UCLA would look even worse. So it's kind of a short more of UCLA. Indiana's a mystery team, but and there's a lot of ifs in these statements, if FIU is better than people think, and I think there's a chance, I like them against Florida Atlantic actually on Saturday, and they are able to handle this travel, Indiana's going to move to 3-0 in my book.
Yeah, I also think FIU is pretty good. We did a preview on them, and we took their over win total. So
they're not terrible.
No, they're not bad. I think because they looked so ugly in a couple games last year, and especially one of them was like the standalone game, so everyone saw it. Yeah. That I think they got branded as like this dog shit program. When I actually think FIU could be okay in that conference this year. But so you're a buyer on 9-win Indiana.
I am, and like I said, I'm playing a little transitive property. They crushed Florida International in that opening game. They have not been tested whatsoever. They're able to handle the elements and get out there, travel, all that. I don't trust UCLA. Brad brought up a lot of the kind of questions on that team, and I'm gonna say Indiana can do it.
Andy, are you a buyer on 9-win Indiana?
No, I don't think they're gonna win 9 games, but I'm gonna bet them this week. I think they have a significant coaching advantage, right?
Yeah,
that's huge, right? Cignetti's a veteran. Foster's coached 1 game so far, and it was I watched that Hawaii game. I know nobody wants to hear me talk about Hawaii, but man, that game sucked. All right, UCLA looked awful in that football game, And they still snuck it out because that Hawaii team looks like they're going to have a lot of issues this year. Plus, the quarterback was banged up. The D-line looked good for UCLA, but it's nowhere near as good as it was last year, right? It was one of the best in the country last year. And Indiana's offense looks like they're in a rhythm. I know they played Western Illinois, but that FIU game wasn't a joke like he said. So they've looked good so far. So I'm not really worried about the travel. Like he said, the extra day. UCLA now played their first game in Hawaii, then went on a bye and didn't play anybody. So like that's weird. They're not in any rhythm. The last time they stepped on the field, they looked like shit. Then they had a week to think about it, and now they got to go play Indiana, who's a pretty good team. So I just think it's a bad spot for UCLA, and I also think Indiana's just way better. So give me Indiana.
All right, I'm not gonna bet this then. The way I was picturing it is if I go in here and these guys co-sign UCLA, I'll do it. But in fact, it was quite the opposite of that. So I won't be betting this one. All right, cool. So thanks, guys, for joining. Make sure you clear the picks out so you can see. All right, so their Twitter names are right on the screen here. Brad does guest spots everywhere. Just follow him on Twitter, and he'll let you know where he's on NBC. You'll see him popping up on all kinds of channels. He's all over the place. And Ben's with Odd Chopper. He does their college football show that we watch in the office all the time. So a lot of good information there. A lot of good injury information. That's where I got the Arizona State defensive injuries that I said in my video. Got that from you guys. So yeah, a lot of good stuff on their show. So make sure you give these guys a follow and show them some support.